It all started with a single text and ended with a life lost. Welcome to the dark thread, where we unravel the stories that blur the line between love, obsession, and tragedy. It was the summer of 2014 when an 18-year-old boy named Conrad Roy parked his truck in a quiet Kmart parking lot in Massachusetts. From the outside, it looked ordinary, just another vehicle parked under the yellow glow of streetlights. But inside that truck, a life was slipping away. A small generator hummed softly, filling the cabin with deadly carbon monoxide. By the time the sun rose, Conrad was gone. At first glance, it looked like another heartbreaking case of a young man who had given up on life. But when detectives unlocked his phone, they found thousands of text messages. Messages that would turn a simple suicide into one of the most disturbing and unprecedented legal cases in American history. Those texts led them to a 17-year-old girl named Michelle Carter. Conrad Roy was, by all means, a bright young man, a good student, an athlete. He had plans, but behind the smile was a quiet storm. He battled depression, anxiety, and self-doubt for years. He'd been hospitalized for suicidal thoughts before. He wanted help, but he also wanted peace, and that peace, he believed, could only come through death. Michelle Carter lived miles away in Plainville. They met in 2012 while visiting relatives in Florida, and though they rarely saw each other in person, they texted constantly. Thousands of messages. Their entire relationship unfolded through screens, a love story that existed in the digital ether. At first, Michelle was supportive. She encouraged him to seek therapy, to talk to his family. But as months passed, her tone shifted. Their conversations took a darker turn. It wasn't about living anymore, it was about dying. About when, where, and how. Michelle would tell him things like, "You just have to do it, Conrad. And the time is right. You can't keep pushing it off." Sometimes she'd even help him plan the details. How to do it, what method would be quick, what location would be peaceful. What began as empathy slowly morphed into control. She became both his confidant and his executioner through words alone. On the night of July 12th, 2014, Conrad sat in his truck with the generator running. He had second thoughts. He got out of the truck, gasping for air, panic setting in. He called Michelle. What she said next would define the rest of her life. "Get back in," she told him. Those 3 words sealed his fate. He did, and that's where it ended. The next day, police found Conrad's body. They also found his phone. It was filled with conversations between him and Michelle, conversations that would soon become the center of a courtroom battle and a national debate. Detectives were stunned. Michelle hadn't just been a passive listener. She was actively encouraging him to go through with it, telling him to stop thinking about it and just do it. Even after his death, she texted his friends and family, pretending to be unaware, asking if they'd heard from him, playing the part of the grieving girlfriend. But then she slipped. In one message to a friend, she confessed, "I could have stopped him. I was on the phone with him when he got out of the car. I told him to get back in." That single confession changed everything. Michelle Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter, a charge that would ignite headlines and divide opinions across the world. Could someone truly be guilty of homicide through words alone? In 2017, her trial began. It was unlike any other. There were no weapons, no fingerprints, no physical act of violence. Just text messages and a single phone call. But those words, her words, were enough. Judge Lawrence Moniz found Michelle guilty. He said her actions were wanton and reckless, that she created a situation where a vulnerable person was pushed over the edge. The court ruled that her words had directly led to Conrad's death. Michelle was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, though she served only 11 months before being released. As the trial unfolded, more details about Michelle's behavior in the days following Conrad's death came to light. She had texted several friends saying she wished she had been there for him, that she should have stopped him, that she felt guilty. But prosecutors argued these messages weren't signs of remorse. They were attempts to shift the narrative, attempts to make herself look like a grieving girlfriend instead of a key participant in his final moments. The contrast between her private messages to Conrad and her public messages to others painted a chilling duality. Two Michelles, one encouraging death, and one pretending she had nothing to do with it. There's also a disturbing element of attention-seeking behavior. During Conrad's memorial events, Michelle would repeatedly message friends saying she wanted to organize charity runs in his honor or write articles about teen mental health. Some friends felt uncomfortable, noticing that she spoke more about how she was feeling and how she was suffering than about Conrad himself. At one point, she even texted a friend that she wanted to make sure people didn't think badly of her when they eventually learned the truth about the phone call. It was almost as if she knew the storm that was coming. And when the storm finally hit, the public reaction was massive. The courtroom was filled with journalists, psychologists, legal scholars, and grief-stricken families try to understand how a relationship built on text had spiraled into a national spectacle. People poured in with opinions, some claiming Michelle was a monster who manipulated a depressed boy into killing himself, while others insisted she was a lonely teenager, mentally unwell herself, who got wrapped up in a tragic dynamic she couldn't fully understand. This wasn't just a case anymore. It had become a mirror reflecting society's confusion about technology, mental health, responsibility, and the power of words. But beyond the courtroom, this case left scars far deeper than any sentence could heal. Conrad's family was shattered. His mother, Lynn Roy, later said she knew what she was doing. She could have stopped him, but she didn't. Michelle faded from public life after her release. But the world didn't forget. Documentaries, news specials, even a Hulu series, all try to understand what had happened between these two teenagers. How could someone so young, so seemingly ordinary, push another person toward death with just a few words? Was it manipulation? Was it mental illness? Was it love twisted into something unrecognizable? Or was it all of the above? Psychologists argued that both Michelle and Conrad were fragile. Both suffered from depression. Both were on antidepressants. Both were isolated. In many ways, they mirrored each other's pain. But instead of pulling each other out, they pulled each other down. Their connection wasn't built on hope. It was built on despair. Michelle's messages became his validation, and Conrad's willingness to die became her sense of importance. It was a deadly symbiosis, two lost souls feeding off each other's emptiness. But beneath all the shock and legal debate lies a question we all need to ask ourselves. Where does responsibility begin and end in the digital age? If you tell someone to harm themselves, over text, over a call, are you just talking, or are you committing an act? Can a message kill? In this case, the court said yes, but the world still debates it. Years later, Michelle completed her probation and disappeared from the spotlight. But her name and Conrad's remain bound together forever. Symbols of how technology can turn intimacy into danger and how a simple exchange of words can spiral into death. And that brings us back to where we started. It all began with a single text, a text that could have saved a life, but instead ended one. If you found this story haunting and thought-provoking, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Was Michelle Carter guilty of murder through words? Or was it a tragic consequence of two broken minds? Subscribe to The Dark Thread for more stories that pull you deep into the shadows of true crime, where truth, morality, and madness intertwine. Thanks for watching.